Congressman Boswell, a designated questioner, has now returned. Congressman?
I have returned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you and Chairman Goss for your hard work in trying to bring this resolve. And I would like to address our two secretaries just a moment before I ask questions. Mr. Armitage, you and I have a little history together. I suppose you probably know where that was in Southeast Asia and in the Vietnam situation, and I might make a reference to that in a moment. But I appreciate the fact you said some things didn't happen as we refer to what's going on this talk today. And I refer to them as prevents that we can't talk about that have happened. And I appreciate that. But I think we owe it to these families from yesterday. I mean, it was a soul-searching day yesterday as we talked to them, and I would guess if you'd have been sitting up here, you'd have felt no different than we did. But they need assurance from us that we learned whatever lessons we're learning and that we don't have to learn them again. And I hope that we will remember that and try to keep that information flowing to them, because it's terribly important in their grief, and we wouldn't feel any different. We don't feel any different. Mr. Secretary Armitage, and I'm going to go over to, I think, Mr. Wolfowitz just for a minute. We need to know what's new, and you may not be able to tell us today, but you made a comment. We've known for some time about the chemical and biological possibilities of mass destruction, and somewhere, someplace, we need to know what the situation is with the nukes, how close they are, and I hope that that's in mind. Which leads me to, and some of your your opening comments caused me to think about that. And Secretary Armitage, you yourself, and again, I thank you for your years in uniform and your service now, both of you, in fact. But you and I, and of course others right here at this table, we went to Vietnam, and we didn't have the people behind us. And we know that. And we left there under less than favorable conditions, kind of had our tail between our legs. Worst part of it was the 56,000 body bags that came back. And I don't know about you, but I helped put some of my comrades in those bags. And I'll never forget that. And you wouldn't expect me to, and I'm sure neither of you do either. So I want to know, when we get to the point where you can share with us, maybe not today, the information that will cause the American people to be with us if and when we should go to Iraq. And I think it's terribly important because of that history that I've just referred to. So I hope that that will be shared. And I also would like to know from your opinion at that time. And we'll rely on our chairs to get you with us. What do we do next the day after we take Mr. Saddam Hussein out? Then what happens next? So I guess I want to lead off with that, and I'd like to go to some questions, and I appreciate you being here. I know since I'm the last one to ask the lengthy set of questions, a lot's been already asked, so I hope I don't do things redundantly at anybody's expense because of the absence and so on. But Secretary Armitage, in your written testimony, you note that in the summer of 2001, the U.S. government demanded formally of the Taliban that they cease support of terrorism and that we will hold them responsible for attacks committed by terrorists that they harbored. Can you elaborate on that? Can you describe how this message was received? Was there a reiteration of previous warnings to the Taliban of a significant ratcheting up of the stakes? Could you address that? And have we learned anything from this about the tools that the State Department is disposed to prevent states from harboring terrorists?
Yes, sir. We, in late June of '01, had our ambassador in Islamabad talk to the representatives of the Taliban in Pakistan. We also demarched the government of Pakistan, who was supporting the Taliban at that time. And we made it clear that should any harm come to any Americans, they too bore responsibility. In the intelligence reporting after that, for a short while, we saw that some in the Taliban leadership were trying to put a little distance between themselves and the people they referred to as the Arabs, which we know, of course, are the al-Qaeda foreigners who were in Afghanistan. However, as that discussion internal to the Taliban continued, Mullah Omar finally overruled it, I believe, because of greed, the money he was getting from bin Laden, and it had ultimately little effect.
In your written statement, you discussed the state's information sharing mechanisms with the FBI and local law enforcement still not where they need to be. In addition, our embassies bear a responsibility as hosts for a number of agency representatives, such as the FBI and legal attachés and so on. How well is this system interaction with the FBI and law enforcement working now, a year later after the attacks?
Well, the short answer is it's working much better, but I don't think it's sufficient to the problem. I don't think our own capabilities from our embassy in terms of communication and interconnectivity are sufficient to the problem at all.
Well, sharing of information will always be under scrutiny, and I appreciate what both of you have said. I think in terms of the sensitivity and putting people in danger if it's in the wrong hands and so on, we'll always have to deal with that in a democracy. Of course we will. And it's very sensitive, but and we have to go back and deal with approximately 600,000 people we're here to represent, all of us, some close to that number. And it's my opinion, from spending a lot of time with local law enforcement and the state equal of FEMA and so on, and those that will be on the front line in this kind of a war, that they really need and deserve that the best communication we can get to them. And so anything that we can do to work with you on that, we've got to do the best we can. I trust you understand that, and I would like for you to allude a little more just how we can get there to that's not in a classified sense, that would so we can, if they're watching or if we go home, the rest of us, we can tell them about it, that we're engaged in this. And it's our intent to be sure that they're in the information scheme of things so they can do what we're going to expect of them as we continue this battle with terrorism.
Well, first of all, you're talking to the son of a cop, so you're not going to get anything but cheerleading from me on that statement. But I think my father, as I recall, would have been astonished to find that he was on the front line of a national battle. He thought it was all he could do to get through the day on the street. But that's sort of the mindset that has to be changed immediately. Further to that, we've got new folks in our intelligence community, the Transportation Security Agency. Customs has become so much more important. We've got to be able to more integrate them with this. And so over time, it becomes a seamless flow of information. Now, no witness is going to sit in front of you, sir, and tell you that that is the case now. It would not be, it's not credible. But that's the direction we're going in, and it takes a mind change, not just from the national level, but at the level of mayors and governors, et cetera.
Well, they're very keen on this, and I know that you know that from what you've just said. They're very keen on this, and I just want, and I appreciate your reassurance that you're tuned into it, but I can tell you from firsthand contact, which happens almost on a daily basis, that they're very, very concerned that we don't expect them to have responsibilities that they're not at least informed about, and they need that information. So we've got to keep that in front of us and continue to expand on it. Shift a little bit, Secretary Wolfowitz, what can you share with us? What should the American people know about the toll, the cost that this global war on terrorism will take on the Department of Defense? And how big a threat is this? Your thoughts on how long it would last? How much effort do we need to deal with it? And what do you see as the gaps between the counterterrorism capabilities we have and the counterterrorism capabilities we need? And can we do a war on terrorism and a war on Iraq at the same time? What comments can you give us some reassurance?
Covered a lot of ground there.
Well, I'll go
but
back.
I think the answer is we have had substantial increases in resources, for which we appreciate the support of the Congress. I think it's made a huge difference. There are strains in certain areas, particularly in the call-up of reserves. I think most people who signed up for the reserves some years ago probably didn't anticipate the length or the level of demands that this new Homeland Security mission would place on people. But I think the force has responded magnificently so far. I believe it has great capability to sustain what is probably going to be a long war. You asked how long. I don't think we know how long. As we get a better idea of how long it will be, we'll have to assess at each stage what kinds of resources we need. But I think we have adequate resources now, and I believe, as Secretary Rumsfeld has testified, it's a mistake to separate this issue of Iraq as something separate from the war on terrorism. It is very much part of the war on terrorism, and I think we, depending on what the President asks us to do, we have a very wide range of options that we can sustain, I think, with the military capabilities we have today. But we certainly are anticipating getting the full level of increases that are planned over the course of the 5-year defense program that we gave to the Congress last year. We've got to be on a steady but not overwhelming upward curve.
Well, I guess the point I'm trying to make is we're going to have a war on terrorism and the potential of this war with Iraq, which is certainly getting lots of attention. Can we afford it, and can we take care of the homeland in the process? And this is something that people are sharing with us as we travel back to our districts. And I think that's a fair question. You know, picking up the tab, taking care of homeland, ensuring that Europeans, the region, and whatever, as we go back to probably classified things at some point, are picking up their share of the tab. And so I think our folks, the American people, get behind all this. We're going to have to communicate better than we are so far. And some of that responsibility lies on us, but a lot we have to rely on you. Because I've often said, you know, because of being on this committee, I kind of know what some of the threats are, but I don't know what is going on with the Secretary of State as you folks travel and do all the things. I mean, you can't keep us totally informed on that. I understand that. And maybe you're accomplishing some great things that we don't know about, and some place and point you can tell us about it. And when you can, we need to know, because again, going back to my opening statement, I want the American people got to be with us. And there's a lot of doubt out there. And they're reminded of the 56,000 body bags. And they bring it up to me once in a while because I'm a Vietnam veteran, as you are. So I trust that you understand that. Well, to move on, I guess.
May I make a comment?
Yes,
I think
please.
Paul probably wants to comment too. I'm not contradicting what you say. And you're right. One of the questions that we, and you particularly, with your responsibilities, have to ask is whether we can continue the global war on terrorism, and depending on what the president decides, handle Iraq and take care of homeland security. That is one of the questions. And I think one of the other questions that I hope constituents are also asking, or at least being asked to think about, is can we afford not to act? As Paul and I have been discussing last night and this morning, this very hearing, and we were thinking to ourselves, if a terrible event happened from Iraq, what kind of hearing would we be having if we hadn't done something? And that's a fair question, I think, and it's one that I think we have to, you're suggesting we should do a better job communicating, fair enough. But I think it's also fair to have this discussion with the American public along the lines of what is the cost of no action, and we happen to feel it's considerable.
Congressman Boswell, one thing that I don't think has gotten communicated sufficiently in public, and that is the way in which this war is a global war, and that is the reason why separating out the issue of Iraq from as not part of the war on terrorism is a mistake. Let me give you a couple of examples. We have uncovered a whole network of al-Qaeda terrorists in Southeast Asia. We would have never gotten at those people if it hadn't been for the action in Afghanistan, which unveiled some capabilities that were going on in Singapore. The success in Afghanistan drove several people, including the man we detained a couple of months ago, Abu Zubaydah, and probably now this guy we got just very recently, Ramzi bin al-Shib, into Pakistan, where we were able with Pakistani authorities to wrap these guys up. And finally, I mean, among the many interactions here, the fact that the Taliban supported terrorists and are now no more is a lesson to every other government around the world that used to support terrorists and now begins to think whether it has to change its policies. So it's really a mistake to think that there's one struggle, which is terrorists, and this issue of Iraq is something completely separate. They really are part of a piece. And finally,
let me just interface with you a little bit. That's a point I've been trying to make as my opening statement. So we understand that. And this guy is a terrorist, and he can provide a lot of resources. but we've got to be able to protect the homeland, and I appreciate what you're saying, so continue, please.
Okay. And we are protecting the homeland in every way that we can, but as I said, we can only get so far playing defense. So we're going to do everything we can defensively here, and undoubtedly they will come up with some surprises we haven't thought of, but our real effort is to get them out of business.
Then we got to make the case, and that's where we're not there. We got to make the case, and we rely on you to come to us and make the case. And I know you're doing some of that now, and I appreciate the presentation to the UN, but the American people, we need to hear the case. And then I think the support will be there, but we got to make the case.
Thank you.
Moving on, I guess our time's okay. Secretary Armitage, much of the success in the campaign against Al-Qaeda has been the result of significant assistance, and we've been touching on that from foreign governments around the world. The administration has much to be proud of in working with other countries. Compliment you on your efforts, you and the Secretary. We have asked them to take dangerous police actions. We've asked them to accept our troops on their territory and to provide us law enforcement and intelligence information to an unprecedented degree. But recently, however, and I'm kind of concerned about it, we've become aware that some of our allies are unsettled about our policies and the way in which we are pursuing our interests, and some leaders are becoming more popular, if I can say that, with their electorate as they distance themselves from U.S. policies. So how strong are our bonds? And elaborate, talk to us about that, because I think that we have to have allies with us to make this acceptable to our people.
You're referring, I think, in Maine to the German election, which will be held on the 22nd of this month, and I think it's quite regrettable that there have been a number of both, to some extent, are campaigning on an anti-American theme. I don't know how, as a general matter, to separate our preeminence in the world from jealousies and from being a target. I think we're going to be that as long as we enjoy this prominence and preeminence in the world. And indeed, American presidents generally do stand up and stand for principle, and I think we're doing that. And most of our allies in this global war on terrorism have been quite good. Even in the case that you cite, I think you were citing, that activities in Afghanistan alongside us do continue with the German, both police and military. So to some extent it's a mixed picture. In other areas like in Pakistan, Uzbekistan, people are not only standing up, but standing up at risk to their governance and to their lives. Witness the fact that President Musharraf's intelligence service thwarted a bombing attempt on him yesterday. So it's a mixed picture. I think it's a better picture than it is worse, but it's a daily struggle, and we're going to keep at it.
Thank you. To both of you, the response to global terrorism threat, it's an interagency situation. Before 9/11, the National Security Council orchestrated and coordinated interagency response to terrorism. After 9/11, the National Security Council interagency system has shifted in adding in particular a Deputy National Security Advisor for combating terrorism. So who reports to both Ms. Rice and Governor Ridge?
Right.
Either.
Who is it?
Who reports to them?
It's now General John Gordon, sir. It was General Wayne Downing until a month or two ago.
Give us some reassurance and elaboration on how the coordination is, the sharing of information at the high level, at the administration level, is actually taking place.
Regarding General Gordon, he chairs the secure teleconference. It's at least twice a week. During last week, it was several times a day because of the fact that we had increased our threat alert. I talk to John probably every other day myself on an issue or another, so I think from my point of view, he's interacting pretty well, just as General Downing did. I'd have to let Dr. Rice speak to how she feels about it, but I have every reason to believe she's very satisfied with the way he works.
I would agree with that.
Okay, well, good. I'm proud to. My time up. No, I've just in the yellow light.
Well, we've had a rule that you don't start a question while you're in the yellow light.
They made a new rule on me. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this opportunity and the time, and I appreciate the efforts, and I just want to leave this, my opening thought, if I could. is that we've got to take this to the American people, and we don't want another Vietnam situation where we've got 56,000 body bags and we don't have the people with us, and we've got to give reassurance of our lessons learned to those families. And I thank you for your attention. I thank you for your time. But yes.
If I may, you're right, absolutely. But I didn't, and I doubt that you left Vietnam with our tail between our legs.
No, I had my head high, but I didn't like the fact.
I didn't like what happened either, but I had my head high, and everybody who served ought to have their head high.
We did, but our people.
It's not your problem or my problem.
Our people were not with us.
Fair.
And you know that.